And welcome back to ScavTalk, everyone. Today's episode, we are up early, at least for me, because we're recording this Friday morning, 5 a.m. We're just so dedicated to this show, Giga. I woke up, I totally wasn't DJing, staying up late at night. No, but Giga's flying out of town tomorrow, so we're recording this a little bit early. But we're here to talk about Tarkov, some of the recent community happenings, and a bit of a further discussion on some of our previous ideas about recoil, gun mechanics, balancing, and then finally we'll close out with the interesting game that's popular all over Twitter and social media about Unrecord, the super hyper immersive body cam first-person shooter that's in development. So, Giga, what have you been up to in Tarkov?
Well, in the Tarkov land, I'm slowly making my way. Oh god, it's so bad. Because now I'm like streaming on YouTube as well. It's so funny
Yeah.
because I didn't really think about how some of these things, like the difference in even just mentality and community. And so I put up on like my title because I want to test out. Basically, I'm just like going through and testing out each weapon after this 15% change, right? And you need to give it like a proper run out. So it's like getting a couple of days on each gun, like different guns I'm interested in, that kind of thing. And I put out, checking out the SVD with the recoil changes, and like so many people came in because like people on YouTube obviously take the title really seriously, right? Whereas people on Twitter don't really care. Oh, sorry, not Twitter, on Twitch don't really care. And I just didn't really think about it too much. And so many people came in just being like, "What changed? What happened? Like, what's going on?" I'm like, "Oh, it's the 50, the 15%." We're just like figuring out. Oh, so it's clickbait then? And I was like, "Wait, hold on a second. No, they're just like, brother, that was like 2 weeks ago." I was like, "Yeah, I know, but I haven't used the gun since then. Like, what?" What do you want? So I had to change it because like chat was getting so distracted by the title on the YouTube side. I was like, goodness me! Like, I was actually quite surprised. I was quite surprised. So anyway, it's still a learning experience figuring out just the mentality as well of the different communities. It's funny, but yeah. So needless to say, I've been using the SVD a lot. I still had Punisher 6 to finish because my broad goal this wipe was to sort of meander towards the Lightkeeper, and the meandering does not require Tarkov Punisher Part 6. So you can do Punisher Part 5, and then that's it, right? And like the SVD, it doesn't normally fit into my usual game cycle unless I'm specifically doing that quest. And so I just left it and did the other things. So I was like, well, we've got Long Line to do, we've got Punisher 6 to do. I was taking a little bit of a break from finding the CFDM radios because like I just didn't want to spend 2 weeks just spamming chalets over and over again, and I just didn't really want to deal with the rogue camp. So I was like, let's take a break, let's play some Interchange, let's check out the lighting as well at the same time because I haven't played a lot on Interchange since then. And we'll see. And so I've been taking out there. We got Punisher 6 finished. We got like a bunch of kills down for Long Line, and I actually think the SVD works really well on Interchange because it's that DMR experience, and there's so many areas. As long as you pick your place properly, there's so many areas that are they're the right range for it, and you can keep yourself at the right distance, and there's places to escape and yada yada. So it's been interesting. Like I feel like most of the fighting I've done has been around Idea and the Idea office for some reason. Like I now randomly feel like more comfortable there than other places. I always used to be like an Ollie boy, and now I'm like an Idea office kind of guy, and it's cool. I've got a video coming out tomorrow about the SVD, and there's like a bunch of fights in there. There's one which is like really nuts. There's like a team of 3 that like walk in, they're like walking in all tactical, whatever. And I'm like actually up on the balcony. This is like on the Idea entrance, and I'm up on that balcony on the, if you come in on the left, and I like track them. And as they start to like go towards the office, I'm like, bang, shoot the first guy, like lay a load of shots into the second guy. The front man like runs into the room.
Are
and
you
I see
unsuppressed?
No, I was suppressed. Suppressed.
Okay.
I've gone all suppressed SVD because it's just too obvious. Like if people know what gun, they're like, that's an SVD. It's right there. It's like,
but I love the unsuppressed SVD because I feel like it strikes the fear of God into men.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. But yeah, the front man like ran into the room, and then I watched him just get like pinned to the circular like glass bit by someone else on the other side.
Oh.
He just got like full autoed by someone else. And I was like, oh boy, these guys got like properly pincered between me and someone else. And I did like the most epic flank through the whole of Idea, like right away so no one would hear me, all the way to the other side, shot one guy as he left the office and tried to double back on himself, killed him, and then looped all the way back round again and killed the final guy as he was looting. It was like the most epic like flank kind of, SVD play thing. It was awesome. It's cool when those kind of things work out. So yeah, the SVD's been really good. I've been enjoying that a lot. And Yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking like what gun to move on to next. Like I keep wanting to use the MP5 SD, and I've used it a bit, but if you get into those like slugging fights where you can't snap a headshot, it's just you don't win, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It definitely has its weak points, but I
Yeah.
love seeing you glow up there and brighten up when you talked about the epic flank across the.
Mm.
That's like one of my favorite things about Interchange, and I hear a lot of sentiments that they like labs because you can do all these flanks, and Interchange is kind of similar ish, and yeah, I think you're coming around. You're starting to see the light now that the lighting's turned on in Interchange. You can see the light.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of know what you mean now. I think before, because I didn't have like I knew the map broadly speaking, but didn't have
Right.
like that kind of intimate knowledge, and that sort of like the nitty gritty knowledge of it piecing together is like it's starting to arrive where I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, this guy's here, I'm here. If I go underneath, I can loop through these stairs and get this angle and stuff. Like it's starting to come
Yeah,
together.
yeah, yeah.
And with the lighting, I feel a lot more confident actually making those
That's
pushes,
good.
because if I run into somebody along the way, I might not die immediately when I run into someone, because that was always the problem before. It's like you're running, and then you just at one shot out of nowhere while you're halfway through making some maneuver. It still did happen. I posted something else on Twitter, which I was just wandering along and just got magnum buckshot in the side of the face by a guy like in the planters. He was just like
Yeah, I saw
behind
that.
the planters,
Yeah,
and it's just little shotgun and a guy's head over the top of this thing. It's insane. It's a bit unfair posting
yeah.
it to Twitter and being like, spot the PMC, because like the only way that you're really going to spot it is by seeing the movement, right? Like watching a
Mm-hmm.
static frame, no one's ever going to see the guy. It's like it's only the movement, the motion of the person's head through the foliage that you're ever really going to spot, right? Because that's what humans are good at. We're predators by
Right.
our very nature. So the it's the movement of things is what we're really good at seeing. But anyway, yeah, no. So talking about guns that strike fear, and I will lead into the first piece here, but there's guns that strike fear into the heart of our enemies. I actually fought another streamer, the German streamer, Moin something. I hope she's streaming German. I'm pretty sure she's talking in German on her stream. Anyway, if she's not German, then I'll probably start some second kind of internal European war. But anyway, so I fought against her, and we were outside. I had the SVD, and she had the XMC,
Mm.
and it was actually an interesting one because it was the little footstep bug, so I knew where she was
Oh
and knew that she was
no.
coming. And I turned around and I'm like round one of the sort of cargo container type things, and we both shoot each other at the same time. And you can see on my POV, I'm actually wearing the TTSK rig, and because FMJ is 47 pen, I think the XMC, because obviously no one has AP Lapua
Right.
AP. It's really like I don't think it can. It's very unlikely to one tap a class 6 because of that. I think it's really low. It's like 3 or 4%. I think so. But the armor damage is insane. But anyway, so I just like tank this shot from FM AP. Well, sorry, not AP. From 338 FMJ, and you see the dust cloud, like
Yeah.
my guy.
Yeah.
I was like, oh boy, they've got a huge gun. Oh my god. Like, we're just going to leave. And I just literally like Scarpa. And then we end up meeting each other later. And I managed to get like a long shot through from kind of a similar place. It's like up by outside of Idea office. And she was like all the way the other end where the escalators come up, like before you get into the main mall. She was like all the way along there. And I managed to get like a 100-meter headshot on her that way, which is kind of neat because it was shooting and stuff. So it was just like a kind of unlucky timing. It was really funny actually watching the two clips together. It was really weird because we both fire shots at the same time. We both then pull back with our thoraxes damaged. Actually, and this is something also interesting that I'll link into later that's intriguing, is that actually her shot went through my arm into my chest and then got blocked. So because I'm going to talk about some of that stuff later. But anyway, so we both like shoot, pull back exactly at the same time on both our screens, both pull out a nade, pull the pin, throw the nade. The nades go over like this. They both go off at the same time. I use a stim. She moves into another position. Then we both get our med kits out exactly at the same. Like it's so weird looking at the two POVs. Like it's almost like we're synchronized, like completely. Really odd. It's like it's interesting to see those kind of player behaviors. Like it's just the way, that's the way to play Tarkov. You have the engagement, then if you pull away, then the nade goes over, then you heal your thorax, then you try to,
Yeah.
it was kind of fun to see. But yeah, so been playing a bunch of Interchange, which kind of leads into the first bit. I still need to kill Killa, and I haven't been like searching for him because I've been doing other stuff, and I don't care about Kappa this wipe, so it's not really that big of a deal. But while I'm there, I'm thinking may as well. And I saw an interesting headline on Tiggs' Twitter saying going live, and there's a new method for farming Killa, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I went to check out his stream, and he was talking about this new Killa glitch, which basically allows you to tell whether he's in the raid or not. Which I was like, oh, this is actually it's really useful, even if you're not hunting for him specifically. So the way it works is you spawn in an interchange. Interchange has a 40-minute timer at the moment, and apparently this works on other maps. I don't know the details for the other ones, but apparently the hearsay is that it works for others as well. But on Interchange specifically, you spawn in, 40-minute timer. You wait until the clock gets to 38 minutes, and you make sure you're paying attention. And what happens then is the regular sort of scav spawns on the map happen at that time, 2 minutes into the raid at 38 minutes.
Yeah.
When they do, you get the packet loss symbol in the corner because the server suddenly spawning all these entities, and there's I don't know, I guess RTT goes up or something. There's some kind of server extra workload that means it's the desync icon appears. But when Killa is on the map, he prevents scavs from spawning until a bit later, or something along those lines. He either prevents certain scavs from spawning, or there's not as many, or something. Something happens, and it means that the server doesn't get into a state where the desync icon appears. So you basically wait until 38 minutes. If the desync icon appears in the corner, or the packet loss, it's desync, isn't it? It's the desync one, the one with the three little lines. Then that means if it does appear, it means that Killa is not there, and you can just reset. If you don't get the desync icon, it means that Killa is there because he's prevented scavs from spawning. So it's actually really intriguing. So like if you don't get it, you know to be careful. Whereas if it does happen, then you can just like wander around like normal and not worry about getting shot by him. It matters more for farming Killa specifically than anything else. I mean, I kept forgetting to look and stuff because it was just like it wasn't really top of head. I was thinking of other things, but it's certainly interesting, especially for people who want to do the 100 Killa kills. I know there's not many of them, but that seriously helps because it's the equivalent of having ESP or whatever, like looking through the walls and then saying that he's not here and then we're going to leave. Kind of the equivalent to that, but everybody gets access to it. So I'm sure it'll be patched out at some point, but tons of people are talking about it. Tiggs was talking about it. I think he learned it from HyperRat, so like tons of people are talking about it. So I really don't care to mention it here. It's fine. I'm not bothered about talking about it at all. And I'm sure it'll go away. So if you want to kill Killa, probably the best way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have seen some stuff related to how they handle spawning, at least on the Tarkov SP side, and it's essentially in like waves, and there's like windows of time, like 2 minutes to 5 minutes after the raid starts, so spawn a wave, and I think there's some other parameters, like it counts how many AI is on the map, and if it's low, then it'll be like, okay, let's spawn another wave and things like this. But yeah, it's kind of interesting how I wonder. Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about the bosses and how they behave with like not letting scavs spawn, or if there's too many scavs, they won't spawn, things like this. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Use it while you can, I suppose. If you an interchange main or grinding the 100 Killa kills, surely not me. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I can't even consider thinking about it. It's like I've only seen him once. I mean, I played quite a bit of Interchange the other day. I mean, I'm up to probably, I can't remember how many kills I'm on to, 13 or something, 14 kills for long line. So I've played like a decent amount of Interchange. I haven't seen him at all. I've seen him once dead, actually, in the recent batch. And I think I've seen him once his wife, other than that, alive, where he killed me. But yeah, I don't know. It's just like, unless you're really trying to move a lot, move all through the map, run to every location, it's just so hard to run into him.
Yeah.
It's tough. The other stuff, I guess, like it's not really a big topic or anything, but people have been talking about hit reg. I saw the latest one was Pestely's post about hit reg, which he actually has like a bunch of things because he's just come back from his like mega trip around, or part of it anyway. I don't know if he's going back to do something else. I'm not sure, but anyway, he's come back on to play some Tarkov, and he's posted a bunch of different clips of him shooting scavs in the head, shooting PMCs in the head, and people taking 2-3 shots to kill them. And even in some of the clips, you can see there's one of the scav ones, which is in particular very busted. And the Ushanka's got like literally 2 holes in it. And
yeah,
they're not dying. And so there's, I find that really odd, honestly, because from everything that we know about Tarkov's like hit reg and that kind of stuff, usually, as far as I understood it, maybe unless they've changed something, the hit reg actually happened on your side. And then it speaks to the server, and the server then verifies whether that shot is legit or not. For better or worse, I always thought that was the system, because you get that, you hit and kill somebody, and when things are quite laggy, there is a delay before they fall over, which is the server then telling you, yes, you did actually kill them. But as far as I understood it, it had to be done on your side because there was no, it just wouldn't make sense to do it the other way, right? Because with desync, like their position versus your position, what you see on your screen versus the server's position, all kind of different. So it kind of has to be done on your screen. So it's weird to see this happening. I mean, maybe the servers are disregarding the information or something. Maybe it's some other protection they've been putting in for hackers, or I'm not really sure. I really don't know, but it looks quite bad. And I have had a couple of incidents where I thought something was happening like that, but I've always just chalked it down to like I hit them in the shoulder, or I missed, or my aim was bad, or whatever. And there was one. Actually, I was just reviewing some clips. There was one I was like, man, I'm sure I hit this guy in the head. And I watched the clip and I was like, I definitely hit this guy in the head. And then I went like literally frame by frame. And it's like an M61 comes in, hits a TC 2002, boink. There's like 2 frames of flash as it ricochets off. I was like, okay, so it was just a bounce. Fair enough. But yeah, there are some legitimate situations where something is busted. I don't know what. I don't know how long this has been going on for. I'm not sure. But more people are complaining about it now, especially with scavs, I think, because you get headshots on them more often. They move in more of a consistent way.
Yes,
and it's more blatant when it happens there.
There's a short on Airwing's channel which I edited, and it's it's him shooting a scav with a AP-20 slug in the head, and like he's far enough away where height over bore is like not an issue, and you can clearly see the red dots on his head. And like I played it in slow mo and everything for the viewers, and you just clearly see him shooting the head, and you can even see the impact in the head. He's got like a Ushanka. Yeah. And I feel like this has been this is all anecdotal, but ever since they introduced the little desync patch where you get the
well, that icon,
packet loss and things, like I'm kind of convinced that they've changed something on the backends where it is a bit more server authoritative. I mean, I can't say for sure, because that would kind of explain. I mean, it's a kind of a feels bad thing where you get invalids, like if you shot the guy and it didn't do anything to him, because in reality, on the server, he was here and you were there, blah blah blah. But like I said, it's all anecdotal. It's really hard to say. I mean, there is scavs that have more HP, but I've definitely seen my fair share of clips and had even some experiences where it's like, what? That scav's not dead? It's just like doesn't add up. But without really getting a lot of insight from someone on the inside, it's kind of hard to make heads or tails of anything.
It is kind of tough. Yeah, I mean, the fact that it was in my chat, Ruki's talking about how there's some scavs have 40 HP. I mean, yeah, people who don't realize that can get kind of stumbled by that, I suppose, because different scavs have different HP pools. I know not everybody's aware of that, and some scavs have more HP than a regular PMC. And I mean, we've talked before that I don't really agree necessarily with those methodologies, just because they mess with people's, I don't know, understanding of like time to kill and that kind of stuff. It's just weird. But either which way, even Big Bullet seems to be doing it. It's very strange. Did you say that he was wearing a Ushanka in the Airwing clip?
Yeah.
Because the guy's wearing a Ushanka in Pestily's clip as well. And I have a feeling that there's a clip that I've got of a guy wearing a Ushanka. Now,
I mean, it could. We need more data. We need more data.
Surely we're not talking about the magical scav Ushanka.
Well, it's because it's interesting. It does technically have durability. The Ushankas, they're 10 out of 10. I don't think it has
indeed.
I don't think it has an actual armor class, but I'm pretty sure you can get Ushankas. Like you can go in a flea, buy one that's like 6 out of 10, which is, I mean, I can't say for certain on that. From I'm pulling from my memory here.
Have an armor class, then how does it have durability damage?
Right, it's so bizarre. Like I don't know, dude. There might be something there with
there's a hidden bastion plate underneath. Class 6 forehead.
That's great.
I did this. I'm sort of only half joking.
I know.
Because I'm like, weird things that they've got in the game that take durability damage but have no armor class and stuff. It's like those things could be the fringe cases where something gets updated and it just like doesn't work with the new like formula or whatever it is that they put in. Like, who knows? And when you start to see a pattern like that, you start to think, I wonder. And it could just be on scavs. Could just be on scavs, like Ushanka's on scavs. It's like the fragmentation thing. Frustrating, right? It's just like you can still fragment on a scav, but you can't on a PMC. So it's really hard to test. That kind of stuff is difficult.
Yeah, I'm convinced there's something going on, whether it's networking or some type of bug, and revolves on AI or the Ushanka itself. I don't know, but yeah,
goated.
Hmm?
Goated headgear.
Yeah, the new meta Ushanka level 1 PMC indestructible.
I mean, it's just I just don't. How can it have a durability, and how would that even get calculated otherwise?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm now like I'm going down a rabbit hole in my own mind now.
Like I said,
I just think of all the things. I'm just like, okay, well, what if it's done like this? And
if it's really a burning question in people's minds, there needs to be some testing done. We gotta get some baselines, roll out a few things. Is it even possible to get a Ushanka below 10 out of 10 durability? I think it is from my memory, but I could be wrong. Is it even possible to replicate that in a raid against a PMC or a scav or something? There's a lot of but I thought it was interesting that Pestily comes back. He's like, hey, I'm gonna boot up some Tarkov, my favorite game. And he talks about this hit reg issue, and he drops in the line, please fix your game at Battle State Caves, which I was kind of surprised coming from Pest,
Yeah, I think maybe because if he's taken some time off, he's kind of like distanced himself a little bit. It doesn't feel quite so ingrained. I mean, he was very scathing, right? He said he literally said first proper day back playing Escape from Tarkov, had 5 times I headshot someone with a bolty and it not register. I'll put a double headshot on a scav, clip below so you can see for yourself. My favorite game of all time is rubbish right now. Please fix your game. Battle State Games with a heart. With a little heart,
with the loving heart,
the loving heart. But yeah, I mean, that's quite big coming from Pest. But I mean, we know that they're working on stuff, so kind of whatever right now. I mean, everyone knows it's scuffed. Nikita knows it's scuffed. That's what they're trying to do with this some of these next technical patches. So we'll see.
Yeah. I'm really excited for the Unity upgrade and this supposed reworking of that code, whatever that means, whatever that looks like, or rewriting the code. I'm here for it, so I'm pretty hyped about. It could be it probably will have some bugs. There will be some growing pains, but I think they'll get it. There's got to be some improvement, right? Because you got Arena. The logic is Arena's coming out. They basically are finally coming to realization, hey, we should rewrite some things. If we're going to rewrite it for this, we might as well rewrite it for the other products, Escape from Tarkov, because they're basically the same games. I mean, I can't imagine it's the same engine, this, that, and the other. Like, it's got to be the same foundation. So, I think there's a lot of good to come in the near future.
Yeah. It's interesting. What was I just gonna say something then about? Oh God, what was I going to talk about?
Netcode, Unity.
We were talking about the Pestily.
Please fix your game.
Oh yes, the Nice Guy. So Nice Guy's latest video, he's been a bit quiet because there's not been that many actual updates, but he was talking about this in particular, about these updates that are coming. And I kind of agree in his sentiment. He's basically preparing people, saying after these updates come through, if they rewrite core parts of the game could be a shambles.
Yeah.
For a while before it gets better. So we're gonna have to just hold the line. Yeah, and figure it out and try to report the bugs and see what happens, because it's almost certainly going to be a mess when it first comes through. Upgrading Unity and changing the underlying engine stuff. Yeah, it's very unlikely that it's going to go seamlessly.
Right.
So we just have to keep that in mind. So what shall we start with? Do you want to start with your bit? Because we're going to talk about some mechanics, some shooting mechanics in general. Do you want to talk about your bit, or want to talk about my bit first? I don't mind.
Send us off. What you got?
Okay. So follow up on the alien tech discussion. Obviously, I was quite upset about that.
Yeah.
I made a video
I was surprised you made
it.
a video, but I was also very happy you did as well.
Because I felt that it was valid and that I could basically do as close to a rant video as I'm ever going to get.
Yeah.
And I mean, people liked it, right? It's good to be honest with this stuff, and it's particularly within my area of speciality, and also because I feel responsible for it too, and it's
Right.
kind of was like felt kind of personal. But anyway, that aside, we talked about that a lot last time. But what it did spark was quite a few different conversations about balancing, because I didn't really talk about what they should do that much. It was more about just making sure that we have a unified approach and that kind of thing. Because I touched on lots of different bits and pieces, and there were other things I could have added some extra stuff to the video. I was like afterwards, because I was talking to people in chat, and I was like, yeah, I'm talking about stocks and this, and people were like, yeah, what about this thing? What about this thing? And I was like, yeah, I could actually add more to the video, but I was like, look, I don't care. I'm just going to keep it the length it is. Like I've already kind of like it's like tied off neatly in my mind. I like don't really want to spend any more time on it. So I'm just going to release it as is. I think that's going to get the point across. And it's under 8 minutes. Like whatever. It's, we just send it.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
But yeah, some people's conversations afterwards I think were actually quite valuable. There was a big discussion in on one of the comments about Ergo in particular, because the obvious takeaway from it is that suppressors probably shouldn't be better than loud builds, at least not around the same pricing points on recoil.
Well, by better, what do you mean?
On
recoil. Okay.
Yeah. So the best in slot builds for recoil should probably be loud builds, because you, within the realms of game balance, you kind of want to, you can have this, but you can't have this. You can have this, but you can't have this. It's like the stuff that we've talked about before. So if you can go, you can be quiet and also have all the ergo that you want for things like the RD and the M4, whatever, and also have the best recoil in the game. It's like, well, it's kind of it's all one way, like why use the other stuff? Like no one uses the muzzles. It's like when I was looking through the loud muzzle brakes, and I was just like, the HK Blitz or whatever. I was like, I've never seen this muzzle in game. I've never seen anybody use it, except for maybe like I wouldn't even pick it up to sell to mechanic. Let's put it that way. Like I had to go dig around, and I was just like, the well-known HK Blitz. I was like, I barely even know this part, and I look at parts more than probably anybody else, at least alongside all the other people who are interested in gun builds. So it shows that something's fundamentally wrong with that kind of balance. There's loads of those loud muzzle brakes, and no one uses them because it's just double bad. It's like there's worse for recoil and it's worse for tactics and suppression or whatever, and the ergo benefit is just not really there. So that's an obvious thing, right? That loud muzzle brakes probably should be better for recoil than suppressors in general, or at least at the top end. Like it should be, you can have two bands for them. So some suppressors can be better than the worst brakes, you know what I mean? But like if you're comparing like for like, best in slot versus best in slot, there should be this and that between the two. It can't just be all on one side of the scale. Otherwise everyone's just going to use one thing, and it's terrible for build diversity and it makes for less interesting gameplay. What is more interesting, and also before I say that, obviously the finding raid stuff also should clearly be better than the stuff you can buy off the trader, right? You would think. That helps people in multiple ways, because it means that the chads can't just buy the best stuff either, and it helps people who are finding stuff and scavenging more so, because they're actually able to find these best items. So
it makes
them just balances out a bit. Yeah, it's like
they're highly valuable because they're only in raid, and the logic would be, well, if it's going to be exclusively only raid, they should have value outside of only being in raid, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, why would you have an item that's only found in raid that's worse than the stuff you could buy 24/7 on the traders? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It doesn't really make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're buying those items from the trader at the trader price. Those items that you find in raid, you find and have to sell at like, lower down whatever the trader's resale is, and because players aren't going to buy it because they can buy it from
exactly.
So it ensures that the finding raid items strictly sit underneath the ones on the trader unless they're better. That's just the way that it's going to be because of like market pricing and free market and economics and supply and demand and whatever. But so the one interesting thing that people were noting, and there was a couple of people talking about this, and I thought it was kind of cool, because we've talked before about the value of ergo, or the apparent lack of value of ergo, and we also talked to Numbers of Tarkov about that too, and about how he had some interesting ideas about making ergo better. And somebody else had a cool idea, which I thought was fun, which would be tying the ADS move speed to ergonomics, because right now,
that's interesting.
when you ADS, I think you pretty much just half speed, no matter what.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe it's different for different types of weapons. I can't remember whether SMGs are better or not. But this would be intrinsically tying that ergo to your ADS move speed. So that if you had a 99 ergo at M4 or whatever, maybe you'd be able to move, or you'd be able to move a lot quicker than if you're using a 15 recoil,
Oh man.
like a FAL or whatever.
Yeah.
Which that'd be kind of interesting. I feel like kind of interesting.
I'm just imagining, the chat on Labs with the 99 ergo M4. The ADS says he loses 0 movement speed. He just like swings around the corner, just beaming people. I mean, this is an extreme, but it's funny.
So these things would need to be balanced, right?
Yeah, but it's interesting. I like the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, because some people were talking about inertia, some people were talking about turn speed. I was just like, let me just be sick in the comments. Don't I've been working my hardest to get rid of turn speed. Don't just like reintroduce it for long guns and stuff. That's going to make the game feel even worse. No, don't do that. So there's like lots of different conversations about that, but that was probably the one that I liked the most, was that because it would make you feel like your gun was ergonomic. You can move with it more easily. Maybe there's less sway when you're aimed down sights and you're moving as well. That kind of stuff. Because you're taking a disadvantage on recoil to get to those extreme levels of ergonomics. So you're gonna have to either control your gun more, whatever. It's a playstyle thing again. It's, do you want to move quicker with or even use lower caliber, like something like the MP5 SD that has really good ergo. It would then add something for these lower, the small caliber arms where you're taking a disadvantage on pen and effective shooting and stuff, right? It's like versus taking an intermediate rifle or something really heavy that uses the really high calibers, and it might go some way to help some of the issues. I mean, I can also think of fringe cases where it wouldn't make sense. Again, the RD is just like, it's super high ergo, kind of no matter what you do to it, just because of the way the gun's built, and it uses like large caliber like bullets and stuff. But if you look at the M1A or whatever, then it would work in that particular case. So there's still some balance needed there, but I think it's an interesting mechanic because it gives you yet another lever rather than ergo just being like, how quiet is it and how fast does it go? Where a lot of people are not even in those CQB situations, aren't even using it for that. They're just point shooting anyway. So
yeah, and there's so much to say there. Like you said, the ergo, change it to like have this move speed modifier. Make it feel better, or make your gun feel like it's ergonomic. And I think that's the key word there is feeling. Like when I reduce recoil, like I can directly feel the effects of my gun is less recoil than the stock version. Whereas like when I increase ergo, like I can feel it, but only like a percentage of time when I'm using the ADS button. Like it does feel snappy. A 99 or even 100 ergo TX15, it does feel snappy, but you're losing the recoil. And the conundrum with the suppressors and loud muzzle brakes that you made in the beginning is like, you essentially, I don't want to misrepresent what you said, but you essentially said something along the lines of that, I'm going to paraphrase, that suppressors are better because you basically get the best of both worlds. You get, ergo, and you could get as much recoil reduction as you would with a loud, but you're suppressed, right? And obviously you're losing ergo in that situation, but it's such it doesn't really, the value of ergo is like super diminished because you only get to see the effects when you ADS, right? We're in a very like high caliber, hip fire, low recoil meta, I would say, in Tarkov. You really don't see like any low caliber stuff, SMGs. I mean, you do depending on the situation, but I feel like the general, blanket is like AK-101 or, M4 or RD or whatever, just like these assault rifles, high caliber stuff. And I think that's the problem with like going ergo is like, sure, I can take my loud M4 and get really good recoil reduction and really good ergo. And, the argument is like, oh, yeah, you want high ergo for shooting at long distance. But, like, in that case, I want to be suppressed because at which point it kind of defeats the purpose of me having been heard from a long distance. You know what I mean? It's like, you almost want a suppressor exclusively for shooting at long distance, but then you lose ergo, but you gain recoil reduction, but I'm shooting at long, like there's like a weird conundrum where ultimately what ends up happening is you just use a suppressor for recoil reduction and you get the bonus that, hey, you're suppressed. They can't hear you as well. It's like,
Exactly.
so yeah. And I think whatever, you said that they could change the ergo to include movement speed bonuses, and you said there would be some issues like the RD or whatever, and then we got to keep in mind that we're basically suggesting a rework of the system. So like the old system was built on like these principles, and it was built up from that. So you can't just like copy paste, a new system on top of the old. Like you'd have to rework the foundations to get everything seamless. But
that's very true. That's like a very important point, actually, because people always go down that argument. You're just like,
Yeah.
well, why don't we change this with the game? And they're like, well, no, but that won't work because think of this and think of that and think of the other. And it's just like,
Right.
yes, obviously you have to rework the other things, right? You have to change maybe the base stats of the ergos on the different guns, or you have to do whatever it is that you need to do. You can't just, as you say, paste the new thing in and be like, ta-da, it's all fixed, right? Like
Right,
it's a new framework and the numbers need to change now. That's very important, I think.
Yeah, and this is like the I don't know what like in some ways the modding system is kind of simple and almost elegant in a way. It is complex in that there's a lot of parts and different locations, but like once you get down to the numbers, it's very simple. There's like a few stats that do anything. There's like recoil, ergo. There's like some like miscellaneous flat stats, I would say, like loudness, whatever that does, weight, again, whatever that does. Like you don't really factor these in all too much. It's mainly ergo and recoil, and it's very straightforward as far as like, it's somewhat simple. I mean, the percentages and flat numbers can get a little confusing at the end of the day, but yeah, I just think that they need to, like, I'm not sure what the original idea was, because there's clearly a trend where we see you choose between ergo or in recoil, like you make trade-offs. There's like the PSR Gen 3 stock that's like the recoil reduction stock, and then there's the what's the one on the STM, that stock on there?
Oh god, what's it called?
Oh, the GL, what is it?
GL Core.
GL Core, yeah, that's it. That one's like the ergo stock, right? And in a I think, again, if it was simple and like everything was balanced correctly, I think that system actually works really well because it is very simplistic in nature. But I think they need to do something if they want to like keep this framework of like choosing between ergo, balancing between ergo and recoil. I think they need to like buff ergo in some way, whether it's movement or whatever, because it does feel kind of weak. I mean, we talked about this before many times, I know, but the other part is like weight is kind of a weird thing with like your gun. Like I'm not sure exactly what it does. Like we know it reduces ergo, or I think it reduces ergo. I know it definitely reduces your arm.
Well, yeah, because the thing about weight is that it's kind of intrinsically tied to the part's ergo too. So it's like often a part with high ergo will have a low weight. So these things like they're sort of interlinked. There's like a correlation there, right? If you plotted it all out on a chart, there'd be a correlation between those two things. So they're kind of hard to detach from each other. But I mean, in the broadest thing about weight, as far as I can tell, is that it changes your arm's stamina amount. So it means you can hold the gun up for longer. There is that weird effect where once it gets over a certain threshold, and I'm not sure exactly where it is, it's like 5.5 or 6 or something, 6 kilos. When you ADS, you start to get the overswing. And that's there's an interplay between the weight of the gun and the ergo of the gun, which causes that to happen. So even with relatively decent ergo on something like the M1A, you can get that if you're using a 50-round drum with all the stuff and the SAS chassis, and it's freaking monster of a weapon. And you can still get that like sways a bit extra, it like overshoots when you ADS, even if your ergo is like kind of alright. And that goes away once you get under about 5.5 kilos. So it's like it's these weird subtle effects. Like you're right, it's like ergo's strange. Like ergo. The thing about ergo for me is that ergo matters when it's naught, and it stops mattering so much once you get above about sort of 40 or so. Like it depends on the gun, but it's one of those things that once you can achieve a reasonable level of ergo, after that it doesn't matter anymore. That seems to be the thing. So ergo ends up being like a dump stat half the time. It's how I build my guns. Right?
Yeah. if you can't get any more points into recoil, you start dumping stats into ergo at that point.
Exactly. Or you make like minor sacrifices on the recoil side,
Right.
and get you
Get
change
a
the
large
RK2
amount.
over. Yeah, you change the
Yeah.
RK2 over to like I don't know what, like an SE5, which is the one I tend to use these days.
Yeah.
I think so. You end up with 2% less recoil reduction, but your ergo swing is like 18 or something.
Yeah,
Like
it's
it's
huge.
humongous,
Yeah.
and it's like okay, that's worth it. I go from a 23 Meta Seika M4 to 26, but my ergo goes from 15 up to like I don't know 30 something. It's just like it's a huge deal.
Yeah, which because ergo is a flat stats and recoil is a percentage. Like you're doing a 2% trade. I mean, I guess it technically ultimately is flat, but then it depends on the base of the gun.
Depends on the weapon
Recoil,
too.
yeah, it's just like it's simple and complex in time, but
yeah, I think that'd be kind of neat though.
yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of I'm kind of like, did you have anything else to say about? Because I know we started the Allen Tech and we kind of moved into these different
No, it
parts.
was mainly about the moving section. That was really it. So, I know you had some stuff to talk about recoil, so we can transition into that. That's completely fine. But yeah, Ergo, the closing thought is that Ergo needs a bit of love. It does in some way. In some way, it either
Yeah.
needs to improve the point spread, which is I think what Numbers was saying, or it does its extra move speed when you're ADS or whatever. Something. It needs something. It needs some love for it. Otherwise, it's just gonna carry on being the dump stat on most guns.
That was the other thing I was going to say is you were talking about weight, and I do think that there's got to be some type of stat related to weight of the gun and your like weapon sway. Like I want to say there's definitely a correlation there, but I'm not positive. I'd have to like dig through some stuff, but because I like, in other words, I think if you have a very light gun and you turn rapidly, like not ADS, but you're just turning, or ADS doesn't really matter. Like it's a lot more centered versus a heavy gun is a lot like it's slower. Like it drags behind when you're turning. I can't say for certain, but I would imagine there's probably like a modifier, a multiplier based off weight that affects that.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it. I'm not sure whether that's gun specific, and so some guns just end up being heavier too. So we think that's the case because I think some guns have more sway than others. I'm actually not sure either. I don't know 100% about that whether that's the case. I don't know. We need to look at it. But yeah, some guns
Yeah.
certainly have more sway. The SVD has quite a lot of sway. You really have to hold breath on that boy, otherwise it's all over the place, especially using longer range scopes.
Yeah, so I started up the document for the recoil video. Is the is the current
Nice
headline on it, and I was kind of just typing, just brainstorming, typing it out, and then I kind of got to the point because I've kind of been thinking like, okay, how am I going to approach this? What's sensible? Like, I don't want to overdo it, and run into a situation where it's too late, yeah, but at the same time, it's like. It's like, but I want to like, I want to do a due diligence, and then it's like, marketing. Like, should I just do a more broader video? There's a lot of stuff to consider, but nonetheless, I kind of at a point where I was like, well, we kind of need to go through like a bit of the history of recoil in games, and so I started looking through some of the more notable ones. I mean, I don't want to go back to like vector graphics on 1970s, but I don't want to go that far. But exclusively like first person shooters. So obviously the first one was like Doom, and as far as I could tell, I would have to play it to confirm, but there really is no recoil. And obviously classic Doom, I mean, there is no vertical like movement. It's all horizontal, like as far as like turning your mouse, and it's it's like 2D space, and you just shoot. Like if the guy is in front of you, but he's up high, but you're aiming straight like down, like
it's like automatic correction for the
yeah, it just
verticality on
automatically
original Doom, right?
knows to go up there, right? But there is no real recoil. The only recoil we see is in like the gun animations. You see the shotgun kick up when he pumps it, and same with the other guns. There's animation, but there's no recoil. And fast forward a bit. What was the other, like Rainbow Six? Not Siege, but Rainbow Six. It might just be Rainbow Six. One in 1996, 97. Some of the earlier ones. There is no it's like it was like the first one of the earlier tactical first person shooters. And there is no like rendering of your gun. It's just like you are a camera floating around, but you have like a crosshair.
Oh, I see.
And the crosshair is really interesting because it has this idea like when you're moving, it's inaccurate. So you want to like stand still, shoot, and then control the spread of the crosshair. So we kind of get like a loss in like visual feeling the recoil of the gun, where you have that Doom shotgun kicking, where that's removed. But now we have a much more like interactive gameplay feely of the recoil, where you can visually see your recoil getting worse. Your invisible gun getting less accurate. So I thought that was interesting. And then fast forward again to Halo, Combat Evolved. There isn't really that I could tell. Again, I have to like play to confirm, but there isn't really any recoil per se. I mean, you do have some like screen shaking, especially on the AR, the 60 round AR of the cool little compass built into it. Oh man, such nostalgia coming through right now. But there's screen shaking, but there isn't really any like physical movement of your center of your screen. It's all like you get a crosshair, and the bullets kind of just like spewed out randomly within a cone of that crosshair. But it's a very
interesting.
It works though, because the game, you have all these different. I mean, it's such a classic. Have you played Halo, the original Halo? Please say yes.
I played a little bit, not a lot though, because I didn't have an Xbox. So
okay. Well, the basic philosophy was you get two guns that you can carry at one time, and each gun kind of has like its own niche case. There's a shotgun, obviously up close, the sniper rifle, obviously long range, the rocket launcher, shoot rocket, they go boom. The AR, the inaccurate AR, the highly accurate pistol that's completely broken in Halo 1, but whatever, we won't talk about that. The Covenant weapons, the energy rifles, they're all kind of like do different things, and they're meant to use them for different use cases, right? And this kind of plays into like Doom a bit slash Quake, another boomer shooter, where Quake had like, again, you see the recoil, but all the guns, it's like you're not really feeling it or interacting with it. You have like a Gatling gun of some sort, or like a machine gun, and there isn't any recoil, so to speak, but it's just like you're just sending bullets down towards the target. Same kind of principle. Different guns are best used for different use cases. And that's kind of how you interact with it, right? But it's not until we get to, I want to say, Half-Life, but definitely Counter-Strike, that we get the first, like, as far well popularized visual recoil, where you sort of like interact. It's almost like a game within a game, right? It's very meta-gamey. I guess maybe Rainbow Six was also like that, but it's expanded, right? It's you get the classic, you shoot the gun, there's a pattern, and you gotta control it and whatnot. I mean, I think Half-Life doesn't really have that. It has a little bit of like the MP, like the submachine gun in the original Half-Life. There's like some type of screen shake, but I think it's actually directed based off your center of your screen. Like it's not just purely visual. So like it almost looks like the guns, like your whole screen's bobbing up and down as you're shooting it.
I can't remember how it works in Half-Life. I really can't, because again, because it's single player, I'm not not as was never as worried about it. Or you're shooting at bugs at like point blank. That's all I remember about Half-Life. The overwhelming of either just getting face hugged or just like bugs on the beach in the sand buggy.
Oh yeah. You're thinking Half-Life 2.
I think Half-Life 2, yeah.
Yeah.
Great games. I never played the original.
Yeah, there's I think it's even now an official game, but there was a mod that took Half-Life 2 and then it just deconverted it into Half-Life 1, both the Half-Life 2 engine and graphics and everything. And it's called Black Mesa. You should check it out. It's a lot of fun. So you get to like experience the OG Half-Life in the modern era. But anyways, that's what I've been up to in that little small bubble. I mean, I want to see more. It seems like it wasn't until Counter-Strike that really brought that sort of mechanic to the forefront, and games have kind of expanded. since then. And obviously with Counter-Strike, I mean, it's a very like, there's a lot of complexity and depth, and there's still some randomness to it. Like, because even the older games, the boomer shooters, it did. I mean, I'd have to play to confirm, but it didn't look like there was that much. I mean, there's some randomness, but some guns like the rocket launcher, it's not very random. It just shoots a rocket straight. The railgun, it shoots a beam straight. But there's some guns like maybe the shotgun and the machine guns. There's a little bit of a variation, but that's kind of built into the design philosophy where it's certain guns are used for certain scenarios, and there's no like real skill check. Whereas like Counter-Strike, technically, there is some guns like the AK or the M4, you could use them long range and full auto with them. It's not recommended because there is some variation on the shots, right? There's like a cone. But with enough skill, you can pull off some pretty crazy stuff, which is interesting.
Yeah, what's so interesting about what you said actually about the older shooters is that kind of the design philosophy was just entirely different with these kind of things. It was, you think about Quake and stuff, it's all about, because recoil was never really the focus back then for most of these games because move speed was so high, and depending on the game, like each one's different. But you talk about Halo again, it's very similar. There's lots of movement, and because of the setting, a lot of the time, or just because of the way the games were designed in an arcadey way, people actually had quite a lot of health, and so they played out a little bit more like Apex Legends does now. And it means you have to shoot people quite a lot of times, and so recoil was less of a problem because the games were then more about like FPS shooting skill, right? Especially in Quake in particular. It's about mechanical skill in shooting in and of itself, and the move speed is super super high on that basis, and so you can get enough skill, I guess, like skill gap and skill cap in that game without needing recoil confusing the situation, right? There's enough going on, and it's hard enough to be a pro already. Whereas when you move over to something like Counter-Strike, you look at the movement, it's like much more, it's once we move into this realm of like realistic shooters where you move in a realistic way and you can't just like bounce off like launch pads and all sorts of crazy shenanigans, It's like, okay, well, now everybody dies really fast because everyone's just a guy, maybe wearing body armor, and we don't move very quickly. So it's now so easy just to beam people because like no one moves fast enough to make it like enough of a challenge.
All right.
And so, okay, well now we need to bring recoil in to add some more skill there. Okay, fine, we'll add a pattern-based recoil for CS, and like, okay, there's the next skill element that comes in to distinguish between players. That seems to me, at least, just hearing what you're saying and reflecting on it myself, is a plausible reason as to why that ended up becoming more in focus. Because it's like, is it really realistic to just beam somebody with these guns? I mean, maybe in some cases, but is it necessarily good for gameplay? Well, I don't know. We can probably bring both in, right? You feel like the gun's got recoil, whereas it's also improving the sort of the skill base of the game as well. What I always found really, I've never been very good at Counter-Strike. Like genuinely, the games that I got on with much better was the Call of Duty series. As I've said before, I actually quite like COD. Like I haven't played a proper Call of Duty for a while, but I was always way better at Call of Duty. There's something about CS that I just, because of the patterning thing, and the fact that you just have to go and learn it and stuff. Like I'm just not spending the time doing it, I guess. But it's not intuitive. I guess that's the thing. Like I felt like with COD, I could just playing it better, whereas with CS, I had to like go and like actually do the like train the stuff.
Yeah.
It's hard to get better at it without like looking at the pattern, like trying it out, trying the pattern. Whereas you can just play the game of COD and get better at COD, which kind of improved the experience for me, right? Because I was never playing these FPSs competitively. I've played them all through my gaming life, but I was always playing RTS competitively, and FPS I would just play it. So I felt like I could naturally get better at COD rather than having to actually like train it in the CS world. But yeah, the thing that especially early on that always used to throw me was how when you fire in CS, the bullets after the first couple they start, they go above the crosshair, and the crosshair doesn't actually go anywhere. You have that that targeting mark on the reticle, as you said before, like it widens out to sort of give you some semblance of the fact that the recoil's increasing. But you end up with the bullets, they all go like above the crosshair, and you just have to like know the pattern. It's like it's super
weird.
Super weird.
Yeah, it definitely
it's really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just never sat that well with me, but it's just a different thing. It's just a different thing. It depends on your preference. And what? So yeah, I mean, you're much more in touch with the Rust community than me. Are people happier now after the pattern based
boy.
recoil has gone away, or like what's the deal, or is the
I,
community just completely split?
I don't know. I mean, I've heard a lot of people voice their opinions on it. They don't like it. You know, they're making the game more casual. Like, I think I think the hardcore players don't like it as much. I think there's outliers that do. I'm sure it's a mixed bag.
Mm.
I mean, the thing. Well, before I talk about, let me jump back on a couple of things you said.
Sure.
One, I think it's a great observation you made. I think because CS was like, hey, this is a tactical shooter, and there really was like there was Delta Strike and Rainbow Six. They were like also like tactical, but this like really changed the landscape of what tactical shooter means because you're right, you do move very. It's a lot slower, and then you have this weird like mini game you play. Like it's just it sort of expand upon what was already there. Like I mean, some of these like GoldenEye. Like I haven't played Delta Force in a while, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty basic. Like you turn, you shoot, and very basic stuff. No real recoil. And when it comes to like GoldenEye, for example, on the Nintendo 64, I was really surprised to see the recoil on some of these guns. Were like there's an AK you pick up, and there's basically no visual recoil. Like there's no camera recoil, there's no gun recoil. Like it just shoots bullets. And of course, in that game, the shooting mechanics are really weird. I think you can, by default, you just sort of like your character just like James Bond just automatically targets the stuff in front of you. Like you don't have to really aim per se. Like you kind of just gotta like turn, but you can switch to like manual aim mode, which is it's just very weird. I mean, 3D games back in those days were such a new territory.
There were no standards either, right?
Yeah.
So everyone was just doing random stuff. Like no one had come to some kind of consensus. It's like this is the way these games get designed, and this is how they get put together. Right now, you see all the same mechanics because it's been iterated on 1 billion times.
Yeah, and there will be more iterations to come, and that's the even more exciting part. But it was really surprising to see no visual recoil at all, which made it look so weird. Like watching the gameplay because the gun wasn't moving, just like. Obviously, there's muzzle flash and bullets were flying out, and you could see the impact. So there was like some, feeling that my gun's shooting off. It was just very, very odd. But yeah, I do think you've made an excellent point there, going from the high movement stuff because there's tons of skill points or skill ceilings in Quake just outside the movement, like map knowledge. This knowing timings of this. I mean, it's crazy watching some of these guys play too. Counter-Strike, I mean, the skill ceiling's probably high, just as high, but it's just in a different format. So anyways, that's about as far as I made it through the history. I want to keep exploring and see how deep the rabbit hole goes and what other stuff, because you brought up COD. I'm interested to see what Call of Duty, some of the more older ones, they were pretty big games of their time. So yeah, anyways, jumping back to the Rust stuff, I don't know, dude. I mean, I haven't really played it that much. In my opinion, though, I think it's just better. I mean, I've seen people, some Apex high level players within gaming, quote unquote professionals. They had some takes that I kind of agreed with. Like, this is just better. Like, you don't have to spend. I think that's there's this concept of depth and complexity, and I think I'll talk about it a bit more, but I think anytime you add complexity, you add depth, but when you add complexity, you add years on your life. You know what I mean? Like, what if there's a great line Ben Brode said in the GDC where he was talking about Marvel Snap, and he said something like, if a game takes you a lifetime to master, then what's the point in adding more complexity? You only get one lifetime. You know what I mean? So he actually thinks there's a depth limit where if you go too far past the depth limit, you're just kind of breaking this relationship. So the idea is it's like a chart where on the left side you got complexity, and on the bottom side you got depth, and there's a diagonal line drawn across. So if you add more, there's a relationship there, right? And chess or tic-tac-toe, for example, he said was like really low in complexity, really low in depth. It's a very simple game. And then he said Monopoly is like really complex, but actually has a low amount of depth. There's
I actually agree with that. Yeah, very much so. It's a glorified random number generator.
And then you got Go.
That's maybe being unfair, but
No, dude. Screw Monopoly. I used to play it so much as a kid, thinking it was a great game and I loved it, but it's just a horrible game. Anyways, then you got Go, which I was not aware of, but maybe you are. It's essentially it's like this grid on a board.
It's like tic-tac-toe on crack.
Yeah.
Well, no, not tic-tac-toe. So it's like checkers on crack. That's
yeah. It's a grid. Like imagine 25 horizontal vertical lines that make up a grid, and you have these white, there's two players, white pebble, black pebble, and you take turns placing pebbles down on like where the grids intersect, and then you can only place them side by side of your same color, and the goal is to like make real estate by completing sectioning off sides of the grid, if that makes any sense. There's a handful of rules, and that's kind of it. It's like there's a lot of complexity to it, like but as far as like there's a lot of depth to it, but as far as complexity goes, like there's only like 4 or 5 rules maybe. Like it's pretty straightforward, honestly. I watched like a 8-minute video on it, and it was like, oh, okay. Like I had some stuff, like there was like one rule that was like like I need to like play a few rounds to really grasp everything about it, but otherwise I was like, man, this seems like a really advanced checkers, as you said, or something like along those lines.
Like the number of combinations in that game just is like it's just explosive. It's just like after making the first couple of moves, the number of possible moves just goes. I think it's even more exponential than chess in terms of the amount, because chess has like a lot of rules on like what pieces can go where and all this stuff, whereas like in Go you can put things wherever you want, and so like the number of possible combinations of moves is like extremely high. And the reason why I got onto Go in the first place, I did actually play a little bit on my phone against the computer, just like trying to figure it out for a while.
That's what I want to do.
I was just like, nah, this is going to take way too long. No way. But the reason why it sort of entered into my sphere of whatever is I was following along. It was actually OpenAI, right? It's the same guys who've been doing all the AI stuff recently. Have been like making waves with the various things that they've been doing, and I think it may have even stemmed. I can't remember whether that was the first one or the second one. But they created the AlphaGo, and that was why I first heard about it, because they made that AlphaGo AI, which was beating. It started to beat people who were really quite good, and then eventually they ended up beating some of like the top 10 people in the world. And like now it's at the stage. I mean, this was a while ago, right? It was then at the stage where it was winning convincingly against people who were the best human players on the planet. Which was interesting. It was like it was along the AI route, which is where I heard about it, because I heard about so the tangential project that they did, because they did that Dota one, right? The 1v1 Shadow Fiend mid thing. It was like the same people, and those guys, the same guys now doing more AI stuff, right? It's like it's nuts. With all under the Open AI umbrella, which is very interesting. So yeah, that's where I heard about it, because I think because it's so simplistic, like computers are very good at that game, right? There's not very many rules. But anyway, that's that's a completely different topic. But yeah, it's a good point about complexity versus depth, because you can have a very simple game with very simple rules, but the complexity is extremely, or the depth is extremely high.
Yeah, and you can have the opposite. Like I would argue, like for me, like Dota 2 is sort of like the perfect diagonal line where it's like both extremely high complexity and extremely high depth. You know what I mean? Like it literally takes a lifetime to master. It feels like, anyways, at least 10 years before you can start being like, okay, evaluating your professional career at that point. But it's just like, dude, that's a lot of time. And
it's just interesting because it gives you it gives you so many options that things never become boring. I think that's the critical point.
Yeah, that's so true, and that's what I love. Like, okay, so all this came about from watching a GDC gaming dev community. I don't know. It's a talk where gaming devs, they host like a 1 hour segment. And they talk about their development of their video game. And this one was Marvel Snap. Ben Brode. He's he used to work for Blizzard like 10 years or so, and he helped worked on a few projects. The most notable one is Hearthstone. It's a digital trading card game, etc. I never really played it. But anyways, he talked about making Marvel Snap and blah blah blah. But he had some really cool talks, and that was one of the segments was about this depth limit and depth versus complexity and the relationship there. And that's with Marvel Snap, they made the game really like it's not all that complex. You know, it's pretty straightforward. There's 3 locations you play cards to. You know, you draw like a set number of cards. Each turn you get a draw. There's 6 turns. Your goal is to get win 3 locations. You can play 4 cards each location, and the cards have powers. You know, some cards have abilities, and then they'll have like a mana cost, energy cost, and again, the goal is to have more points on 2 locations than your opponent. It's pretty straightforward, but you know, the fun part comes in where how these cards interact with their abilities and stuff. And then the locations they made that where locations do different things. Like there's some locations where you literally can't play any cards there. So you have to figure out what cards can I play in other locations to like either get them in that location that I can't play cards. Like there's a lot of, and as you said, it makes for this, much like Dota 2, like every game feels fresh because you have a lot of these random, there's like a mix of different types of random, you know, like in Dota 2 there's some RNG when you're hitting creeps or whatever, you know, your damage range, but mainly it's like this concept he talked about called input and output randomness. And input randomness is, I hope I'm going to get this right, is when there's like a random event happens, like you draw a card. That would be the input. And what's that card going to be? You don't know. It's random, right? And so now you have to make a decision based off that random inputs, right? And then random output is where, you know, you cast a spell and it does, or no, you make a decision, right? So I'm going to cast a spell, and then the output of that is like it does between 2 and 4 damage, right? And this immediately made me think of Tarkov. I was like, oh my God, I literally shoot my gun and there's a chance my gun's going to jam. Like, and his thing was like, you know, that output randomness. Again, I hope I'm getting that right. The output input, but output randomness, you do an action and then outputs, like you make a strategic decision and then there's a random chance something happens, right? The players feel like they're less in control. You know, it's kind of like a bad feeling, but it can be very fun at the same time because, you know, you're sort of like playing the lotto, right? And yeah, so that comes into like with Marvel Snap, how these locations.
Do you think that was good or bad? Like in and of itself, is it good, or it's just a thing?
It's a thing because like Marvel Snap has both, right? Like as I said, you draw a card. It's like you're not guaranteed to get the card you want to make the perfect play. You know what I mean? You have to sort of like, that's a random thing that happens and you have to like work with it. But there's, as I said, there's 3 locations, and on turn 1, the leftmost location is revealed and it'll say what it is and what it does. And then you can decide to play on that location on the left, or you could play on the 2 unknown locations. Because on turn 2, the second location, the middle location will reveal. And then on turn 3, the most right location will reveal. But on turn 1, I could still play on the unknown locations, but they could be something really good or something really bad. Like I should have waited. But it kind of makes it like I could play. There's one called Sanctum Sanctorum, which is like Doctor Strange's library or something, and it essentially no cards can be played here. So if you took the chance and gambled on that, you know, you're like rewarded for it. But it's an interesting thing, and I think having both is kind of nice. But yeah, that immediately made me think of Tarkov. Like that's why it feels so bad when I get a weapon jam. It's like I made a strategic decision to like shoot my gun, you know, and then like I gotta like pay the consequences for it with the random outputs. But Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah, it kind of links into what we've been talking about the other day, and I was doing a bit more brainstorming about it, which I wasn't originally going to bring it up, but because you talked about it there, it's like about how, with rounds penetrating arms twice and dealing double damage, fragmentation, and all these kind of mechanics.
Yeah.
It's like, would the game be better off just without this stuff and make things more consistent? I don't know, because that's one thing that I like about. Is it better or not? I feel like in some ways it is better. It depends on how much randomness there is already. I think you can get away with some randomness and not others. And sometimes it makes the game feel better and some worse. Because I know when I used to play quite a bit of Hearthstone. I haven't played for a while, but that was a great game for a while. And that one is
yeah.
very anti-random in some ways. Like obviously you have the cards drawing, but
Right. Right.
in terms of the actual effects on the board, like they do very specific amounts of damage. There's no ranges or anything like that. So
Oh, okay.
you can plan quite in particular. There's probably some cases where that's not true, but it's very precise in that sense. And I don't know, it's quite good in some ways. It's like within Tarkov there are lots of different random things, but things like ignoring fragmentation for a second, but the actual damage that bullets do, that's very static, which is good.
For the most part.
Yeah, I mean, there's drop
I think
off
there's
and that
like
kind of thing, but
there's some variation on pen. It's
there's
very
some pen
small.
variation, yeah. But the damage is pretty much always
Right.
the right amount. I think it is the right amount always. I don't think there's any variation there, which is it's interesting that they decided not to put randomness on there. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like what do you apply randomness to, and what don't you? It's tricky. We have randomness when it comes to pen rolls for armor, and that's influences whether you will actually penetrate or not. And obviously it depends on the class and the rounds you use and yada yada. But you're trying to, as the attacker, you're trying to maximize your chance of going through. As a defender, you're trying to minimize their chance of going through. But at the end of the day, it comes down to a roll. And if you're using 762 BP, sometimes you're going to two tap someone wearing a class 5 just because you get the pen roll twice in a row, and sometimes it's going to take 4 shots or something because they get 2 deflections. And I don't know whether that's necessarily a good or a bad thing. It kind of depends on your design philosophy, I suppose. But I think if you have too many of these things together, then it can start to compound, right? You've got like the pen rolls, and then you've got just which limit hits, and then does it go through? Does it hit another body part? And then fragmentation on top of that. It's like, does it just make things too random? Like you make the right decisions and get punished too often? Like it's kind of, I don't know. There's almost something to be said, especially in a game like Tarkov, where the penetration chance roll, I think, is probably fair enough. That probably is okay because it's difficult to deal with that situation in any other way. But fragmentation is probably less good, I think, in general.
I mean, well, this is the thing. I think you said it best. It all depends on your design philosophy, how you want to approach it. Because one thing he said, like he kind of had the negative connotation of, you would do the action and then a random event would happen, and that feels bad to the players because RNG, right? And then he added like one thing on there, and then it was like also they can tell themselves, oh, I lost because RNG to maintain their ego, and then and the kind of makes, because it's like you got to, like, once it's like I think having both is totally fine, because now you have a choice between, do I make a strategic decision to gamble on the random thing, or do I, a random event happens, how do I strategically react to this? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it kind of goes both ways.
One feels better, like when it's not in your favor. One feels significantly worse. Like well, that's not true. They both feel bad, right? Like if I draw a card and it's like something I can't play, like that feels bad. You know what I mean? But now I have to like think, okay, well, how do I strategically, what else can I do? You know what I mean? Whereas like I play a card that does 2 to 5 damage, it rolls 2, I lose the game. I lost because of RNG, but maybe I should have done a different play, not banking on the 2 to 5 random event. You know what I mean?
I don't know. For some reason, the card pull, like the input RNG or whatever it was that you were talking about, that feels better than the output RNG. I don't know why, but to me it feels better.
Yeah. And I think it's because your action, like, life just happens. You know what I mean? It's like something just plopped into your lap. Like you can deal with it. You know what I mean? versus like I actively did something and then I got screwed, or like I won. Like, was my action, me doing something, was the reason I won? I don't know. I mean, I kind of just got lucky, you know. I don't know. Like, it's just, I think they both can feel bad, but I think more often than not, the latter, the outputs can feel the most worse, but also can be really exciting. Like, oh my god, I'm a millionaire now. I've invested in Bitcoin.
It reminds me a little bit of poker, actually. In some
Yeah,
ways, another game that I played quite a lot of when I was a student, but that game is very much, you know, you draw bad cards sometimes, and that's just fine, whatever, right? You just do what you can with them. But sometimes you make the right play from a sort of every probabilistic, you know, it's like it even just makes sense, right? It just, you have a really good strong hand, and then you lose because of the whatever happens later on, right, on down on the board. And it's a very interesting one because it also comes down to, maybe this is it too. It also comes down to kind of player agency and also improvement and stuff, because like the way that humans get better at stuff is by trying something, failing, and then redoing it, and then trying again. And if you're, I guess it's still kind of the same. Like if you made your whole strategy around drawing this one card and then it never comes, you feel kind of cucked, right? But it's like that's a very specific situation. Whereas if you just draw some bad cards, you're like, okay, well, it was, you know, that is like pure RNG. There's nothing I can do about that. But then if you like make a play and you're like, okay, this is technically and strictly speaking the best play. In your case, it's, you know, this thing does 2 to 5 damage, and if I get 3, 4, or 5, I'm going to win. If I get 2, I lose. And then you hit that 2, you feel like, well, I've been punished here for making like the correct play. And,
but was it the correct play? Because there was like,
this is the thing. It probably is, because maybe you're like looking between several different options that have all got this random chance, right? And you're like, okay, well, this is the least worst. If I look probabilistic speaking and I run all these scenarios 100 times, this one wins more than the other scenarios, right?
Yeah, okay.
And that's very much more like the poker scenario. It's just like, okay, I'm in a situation like what hands could he have that beats me? How often does he have these hands, and how often does he play that way with the cards that I beat? Okay, well, if it's tilted in my favor, we should go for it, you know. And that's the philosophy behind pretty much all of poker, actually, like boiled down into a nutshell. Would he play this way? Like, what's the range of hands that he would play that I beat? What's the range of hands that he would play in this way that I don't beat? Is that in my favor or not? Yes or no? And then you make a decision. But it's weird because it messes with your heuristics on like what was good and what was bad when you make the right decision and lose, and you're like, damn, I shouldn't do that in future, right? Like your brain can't help it. You have to be very strict about analysis and watch stuff back and go, okay, knowing what I knew then, would I still make the same decision now? Yes? Okay, well then it's a good decision, you know. Or was there something else? Did I miss something? Would he actually not have played with this set of hands? Like really, like think I sort of tricked myself in the moment to think like, yeah, he'd play that with, you know, just a low pair and ace on the board or whatever. But like, actually, no, he probably wouldn't. You know, I was just like in the moment, and you go back and that's how you learn from it. But yeah, it's very easy to fall into that kind of it went wrong, therefore thing bad. Which not that many games have that. It's you edge into it with this kind of randomness of, you know, oh well, now I should never play anything with any randomness. I should only go for the 100% certain ones. But then that means that overall you actually end up going to lose the game more because you're then only going for the certain thing. Yeah, it's complicated. It's complicated, but it's certainly interesting, especially when it comes to psychology.
Yeah,
I was trying to find. There was another game, and I just cannot remember what it's called. Like it's crazy. It's a top-down, turn-based, like tactical, like it's a strategy game, right?
Okay.
What is this thing? You have like a squad of like 4 people. It's in the future. XCOM. Yeah, someone in chat's got it straight away.
Yeah.
So I played like a bit of XCOM 2, and the output randomness in that game actually really upset me and prevented me from wanting to play it, because I felt that there was enough randomness anyway in general. Like I felt like you could have like the hit and miss randomness, that would be fine. And there's fog of war, and like you don't know what's happening, like you don't know what the enemies are capable of, like when their turns are going to be most of the time, and all this kind of stuff. And then to have like the randomness on the damage too, I was just like, man, it's just too much. Like you can set up a situation, and the guy survives with like, you know, one sliver of health, and then that's like the cornerstone that makes the whole of your team dies. I was just like, God, like loads of people love XCOM, but like that bothered me, and it's interesting to having this conversation because it reminded me of that game. and about how I never finished it because I was just like, this is too much, right? To have a game that's ongoing through, like, you have to. It's a very sustain and momentum type game, right? You have your characters that are permanent. When they die forever, and you have to sustain that from one fight to the next. So you can go on a downward spiral and makes the game really tough. And when the actual games themselves are so complicated with like RNG all over the place, and there's usually time limits too. I've actually have a friend who was like, you'd probably be better off playing like one of the modded versions where you remove the time limit because it just like it force feeds you through them. Like you have to just go into the fog of war, and half the time you get shot, and it's just like the game's really hard, right? Don't get me wrong, the game's really tough.
Played a little bit.
I probably didn't spend enough time in it overall to be super good at it, but either way, I remember that bothering me for sure.
Yeah, and see, I wonder if like instead, you did, the stakes were high when you were playing, and then you did get the lucky roll, and you won. Would that have like changed your perception? And which is kind of interesting in of itself because it's almost like the success on the game is contingent on the dice roll happening. Like not like the success in your eyes of enjoying the game. Oh, I love this game because the dice rolled in your favor versus I hate this game because the dice didn't roll in your favor. You know what I mean? Like it seems it almost seems like a problem to have too much variation because then you sort of like increase the gap between players that love the game and hate the game.
Yeah. It's a funny one. And there's no right or wrong answer. Some people like the randomness, and it just depends, and it changes the way that you play it too. But yeah, for me personally, I thought it was just there was just a bit too much. I could have had a few things be a bit more precise so that you could plan a bit more, because that's what I quite enjoy. There's some games that are extremely formulaic. There's an extremely old game on PlayStation. Actually, yeah, it was on PlayStation 2 called Dynasty Tactics. It was like actually part of the Dynasty Warrior series, but it's a lot like, I guess, a really early basic version of like Fire Emblem or like any of those kind of games, which are sort of turn based and unit based and grid orientated. But in that, it's like extremely formulaic, and you could set up these elaborate things and then like trigger them, and then all this stuff would happen in a chain reaction, and it was just like super satisfying. Whereas if like sometimes if it like one of the parts was like, oh, 50% of the time this doesn't happen, and then it like just breaks the rest of the chain, you just feel like, man, I feel robbed of such a cool gaming experience. Like maybe this is a me thing. Like maybe this is a me thing. I like certainty. If you execute correctly, I quite like the certainty of these things happening in the right way. Despite that, I still quite like poker. But I mean, I guess there's the reason I don't play anymore. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's all interesting. So since we're on randomness so much, let me talk about this next chart here, which is the luck and skill graph, right? So on the vertical axis, he's got luck. On the horizontal, he's got skill. And at the very bottom of the axis, where luck and skill meet, he's got tic-tac-toe again, because it's it's very low, or I guess very low luck and then very low skill, right?
Yeah,
it's just very, very formulaic. And then on the very top, extreme luck, he's got shoots and ladders, which I don't know if you've ever played it. If maybe there's like some equivalent,
the board game.
Yes,
with snakes and ladders here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I remember playing it a few times as a kid, and it is very just like, oh, you landed here, back to the beginning. It's just completely random, right? And then versus, you got chess on the far right, which I've played a little bit of chess. I mean, I remember there's like this one classic opening move you do, and you could potentially get a checkmate or whatever in like a couple of moves. But from what he said, it's like a very linear formulaic game. Like there's just like you just basically the game doesn't start open up towards the end. It's when it becomes less like it's just very linear, I guess. So extremely,
it's very congested. That's the thing. Like the chessboard is very congested. There's a lot of pieces for the space available.
Yeah, and I guess the pieces are they only do well. They have set things they do.
They're very rigid with what they do too. So.
Yeah. And then at the very top, on high luck, high skill is poker, which I was like, oh yeah, this fits perfectly into what you're saying, which makes sense, You got a little bit of both there. So I don't know. I thought that was cool, and I think overall though, the I think a little bit of like both are good, are fine. Because I think that the appeal of the output randomness, you'd make a strategic decision and a random event happens. I think that can it's polarizing, it can cause wide range of emotions. You could be super excited because you won, or you could be super disappointed because you lost. And I see the value in there, but I do think obviously there's a space for it. Otherwise, shooting ladders wouldn't exist, right? I mean, but it's that's like a kid's it's a kid's game, right? Is what I don't think there's any strategic decisions to make. You just roll the dice. It's purely random. It's chaotic.
Yeah, you actually don't have any like a player agency at all.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's I mean, there's something for everyone, I suppose. But that's what I would say. Is I think it's mostly preference. And in the case of Tarkov, what is that's the question. What is their philosophy on this stuff? Because I feel like we see kind of a mixed bag. It's a little bit of both, right? And we have like a lot of static things, as you said, like the pin, the damage. I mean, there's a little bit of variation, right? But just enough to give a little bit of play, right?
Yeah, it's very small. It really makes no difference. Like the only place that you really see it manifest is in the armor damage itself, right? You get small variations in armor damage. It's like we're talking like 1 to 3 pen difference around some middle level that you see on the ballistics chart. So
yeah, and like gun jams. I mean, the thing you can do is you can do a strategic decision. Like, okay, the random event is the possibility of the gun jam. The strategic decision is to have a gun above 92% or 93%, whatever it is. That's kind of it. But the inverse of that is the random event. You shoot a gun below 93%, and you have a chance to jam. That's the feel bad. But then again, there's a clip on a short on Airwing's channel where this guy pistoling, he was prone and shot once maybe, and then the second shot jammed. He got a stovepipe where this little pistol had a little caliber sticking out, or whatever it's called, shell casing. Yeah, sticking out of his gun. And he got unlucky, but Airwing won. He got the lucky roll. It's just that kind of like polarizing stuff. So I don't know. I do find that in my experience, a lot of like the high level players, etc., they want like a very minimized amount of randomness, and I totally get that sentiment. I mean, I feel like I was definitely there at one point. I mean, I really appreciate Dota's 2 pseudo random, because it's like it's like a hybrid, right? It's still random, but you basically get increasing odds. So like Phantom Assassin, for example, her ultimate, it's a huge crit, but the percentage is like really low, like 5%, and essentially every non-crit you get, the percentage goes up, until you do get a crit and it jumps back down. So you can kind of do this strategy where like you load your crits, like you go hit some jungle creeps a few times. Okay, I got 4 no crits. I should get a crit, right? But it's still random enough where that you're not guaranteed on your next hit you're gonna get a crit. You have those unlucky moments where you do get 9 hits and no crits, and then you'll have those lucky moments where you do get 2 back-to-back crits. Like, it happens. Yeah. But it's a little bit more consistent brought into the middle, which I really like.
I also think it's a really good idea because it evens out those really long tails of unfortunate events, and also flattens out. I don't know if it does it the other way around, but yeah, it just prevents you just from feeling you're getting ruined by RNG, right? It's just like it feels more consistent. It's like it's not like every 4th hit you get whatever, but it's it'll be 2 and then 5 and then 6 and then 3. You don't end up suddenly going for like 9 hits without getting one, which like by pure randomness you should do at some point. And those things happen kind of more often than you expect because you remember those more. So it's definitely interesting. I don't know. It's just the whole thing about randomness is just intriguing. I feel like if there's enough going on, because in something like poker, it's fair enough because that's like that's what the game is about. Whereas like Tarkov isn't about the Tarkov game isn't necessarily about randomness itself, right?
Is it?
I know that there's some like part of the design philosophy is about random, like sometimes things happen or whatever, but The game is about moving around the map, positioning, shooting skill, like all this other stuff. There's all these other things going. And I don't mind that there's some randomness, but I feel that if you introduce too much randomness, you end up kind of ruining it a bit, right? Like adding some randomness can make games more interesting. But then if you add too much, it overrules all the other mechanics and just becomes the thing that everyone's worried about, right? Well, especially when we had when 12-12 first came in and the recoil shot up and no one could really move around anymore and stuff, like most fights were just people stepping out from cover and both players just holding down mouse 1 until someone gets a headshot. And that just felt really bad. It just decreased the skill cap downloads, and it's like you're both, as if you're playing a game where both of you are just trained on each other, and as soon as the light goes green, you just have to hold down mouse 1 and the first person to get a headshot is the person that wins, right? It's like, again, it's like rolling the dice for the ladders game. So you can add too much to make it not work. Right. So there's a healthy balance to be had, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. There's a balance. I mean, there's something for everyone, but I think generally speaking, a balance is probably going to serve the broadest audience the most. So this is interesting, is because I don't actually know, what BSG's design, like internal approach to this is, because this is the thing that's weird about Tarkov. Is like, what is the game objective? Like in chess, it's very clear. But like in Tarkov, like what is survive is kind of like the general thing. Okay, so how do I survive better? Like, how do I achieve that goal? Well, it's like, don't die, or then you start getting to the more economical stuff, which I think kind of plays into like the RNG side. But essentially you're rewarded for surviving by looting things, which that's kind of like random in of itself. Like, what gear did those players bring in? What did you get from those containers? Et cetera, et cetera. Then you sell it on the market, or maybe you do the safe route with the traders. But that's kind of like the measurement of how much you're winning. You know what I mean? Like, your representation of how good you are is like the economical side of it. I mean, you could say survival rate, I guess, but I would kind of make the argument that your stash is the representation of that, because that directly affects your performance potentially in the future. You know what I mean? Like, if I have 0 rubles, 0 items in my stash, my chances of survival are not very good, statistically speaking. I feel like, right? Whereas if I have at least something to protect myself, I mean, that's like the whole argument with with gun rights. It's like, if someone's gonna have a gun, I'm gonna want a gun also to defend myself. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's for survival. Stand your ground, brother. You know what I mean? But, so I mean, what do you think? Am I making a legitimate case here, arguing that the economics is sort of tied intrinsically to survival? Is that the point of the game, is to survive, and your rating and how good you are at surviving is linked to your economical stash value?
It is. I mean, that's one aspect to it, I suppose. This is almost a whole nother topic of looking at somebody's stats and saying, is this player good or bad at the game? It's like, it's one of those really complicated questions where you go, oh, look at this guy's survival rate. It's 40%. Oh, he sucks. And then it's like, oh, okay, but he's got, he's level 61 and he's got 200 million stash value. It's like, okay, so the rates that he does survive, he does okay at, and his PMC KD is like really high. I don't know, whatever, right? Because he's like pushing all the fights. Or someone who's got 71% survival rate. Oh, they must be really good, but they're level 25, and they play mostly their scav, and they've got 96 million rubles in cash. It's like it's really weird. But to your point itself, there is obviously some kind of connection there, right? Like, people look at stash value, see how much gear people have, they use that to get a judge of how good players are at the game. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of like, as we were talking about, I was thinking, yeah, because obviously the loot's random, and people complain a lot about the loot that you get in marked rooms as well, and the various keycard rooms, because that's random too, and sometimes you hit on the lucky jackpot. Less so now, because there's just less high-end items to go around. It's not like you go in there and there's the weapons case, like, could have been back in the day, which honestly is a real shame. Genuinely real shame that some of those moments have been removed from the game because of RMT and all this stuff. I think that's probably where Tarkov has suffered the most, actually. I mean, again, this is sort of a different topic, but I was thinking about it. because you don't have those moments of like, oh, it's X and I need to leave because it's worth, some crazy amount of money. But yeah, so the looting is still RNG, whether you find a marked key or whatever, some other high value items, a purple card, for labs, that kind of thing. And some people find them and some people don't. So yeah, I don't know. Because the Keita said many times that the game is about, sometimes there's things out of your control that you can't do anything about, and sometimes you just lose even if you're fully prepared, which all kind of sounds like, he wants the randomness in there and he wants people to just randomly die even if they've done the right stuff sometimes, because that's just life. But no, I think I would agree in that most people would look at your economic success and see whether that, and then say that sort of drives your perception of how successful you are in the game, because what you can buy, and it's like a combination, isn't it? It's like your money plus your trader levels. It's like once you've got max traders and a bunch of money, you're seen as kind of like having made it or whatever. I still find it surprising now, and this has actually happened more because I think there's a more casual audience over on YouTube. More so on the YouTube side now that I've been on there for a little bit longer doing my regular streams. I get more comments. I get comments over there much more often than I used to on Twitch of people being like, how did you get so much money? And I'm there like sat looking at my stash, just like, I have like 12 mil or something. I'm like, not, it's very average to me anyway. I'm like, man, it's like I've had way more money in the past. So it doesn't necessarily feel like and I'm not really focusing on it. So I don't really, so I'm often like surprised by when I get those comments by those people. They're like, oh, how did you get so much money? Like, what's your trick to making so much money in this game? And I'm just like, oh, I don't know, man. I just play PN, just loot some items and sell them. It's like, I don't know what to tell you.
Says the guy that never loots.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I do loot a few items on the way through, a bit more these days. This is very much a side tangent, but I've actually been enjoying obtaining cash more so this time because I'm kind of like focusing on getting more thick cases and things, and it's actually been quite fun. I've been actually enjoying that game loop more than I have in the past. I don't know why, but I just have.
Monkey
but
brain.
yeah, no, it's
never an activation.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it never really bothered me before, but I don't know why now it seems to be more important. I think because things are getting more restricted.
Right.
I'm more like, I find myself prioritizing more having the space to hold all the things so that I then don't have to scrabble around trying to buy stuff from traders. So it's like, I want to make sure I have 6 ammo boxes full of every kind of ammo, because like I don't use the same gun all the time, right? It's like partly because of me, partly because of content creation. I don't want to be using the same stuff all the time because I can't make the same video about the AK-101 4 weeks in a row, So like I need to use a different gun so I can check it out. And it's interesting as well. So, but that means that I need to have 55A1, 995, BP, M61, M62, M80, the 45 RIP. I need 9mm AP. I want to have some PvP in there, like, because I don't ever really know exactly what I'm going to look at next. So I just want to have all the armors that I want to use. Like, you can only buy 2 TTSKs, and they're in vogue for me right now. So I've got like 6 of them. They're all in like boxes, so I'm not going to run out during stream. Like, I'm prioritizing that a lot more now than I am the other stuff. I think that's maybe the reason why. So yeah, I've been enjoying the grind for thick. I've just bought my 3rd thick case, and I've been crafting moonshine for it, and it actually happens quite quickly if you're just continuously crafting. And that's, I think, maybe is the thing that surprised me about doing it that way, because I don't know, like I'm very I'm very stingy with my cash in Tarkov, and there's still the element of like, I like having big number. It's just fun to have big money number. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. If it starts getting in the way of your play, like, and I still scrape out on all sorts of stuff. I could probably go way more like big than I do. But I like to do a mixture. I like to do a mixture because sometimes you want to go kitted, sometimes not, because then it gives you ideas and blah, 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 content side again. But it feels nicer to increment your way into a thick case through crafting, and you buy the sugars when they're cheap, and then you craft, and it just like, you slowly, rather than making 25 mil and then dropping like 14 mil on it and going down to 11 mil and then building back up to 25 mil. It feels nicer to just slowly, like, to slow your progress from 11 mil to 25 mil, and then to finally buy one. Or like, say you, rather than getting 25 mil, you go up to 15 mil instead from 11 mil, because you're spending money just incrementally throughout. But then you have another thick all of a sudden. You're like, hey, this feels great. It actually just, it mentally just feels nicer.
Yeah.
I can't really explain it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could try. It's kind of like having a savings account, like if you're sort of like, instead of just buying the new VR headset and, going bankrupt, like you sort of like incrementally put money away, so to speak, towards that over the long course. And you still have that emergency fun, if you have a bad streak in Tarkov or whatever. I mean, that I've done the exact same thing, buy or craft a bunch of moonshines, get the holodinks, store them up there, and eventually, slowly but surely, using the non-found rate abuse, putting the LEDXs or ophthalmoscopes scopes in my butt and dying. It's like, oh, that can go towards a thick case. You know what I mean? It's like, so, but tying it back to randomness here.
Yeah.
I wanted to say this is why I think that it feels doubly bad in Tarkov with the randomness, but also feels doubly good. So it's like I'll use an example I saw in your chat here. So someone said, example of RNG doesn't feel good in Tarkov, 338 AP round being shot at 600 meters and ricocheting off a helmet. Okay, so breaking that down, right? You invested a portion of your value, right? You've done a lot of good raids. You're a good player. You're getting rewarded because you're looting stuff. You're extracting. Maybe you're killing players. You're taking their loot. So your value's gone up. So now you're going to invest that into a really expensive item that's like a really good item, right? But it still has. There's still the laws of RNG that exist in Tarkov, like ricochet chance, or using like let's say accuracy. Okay, I mean, it's not really a big deal in like Tarkov, VSS snipers. There's like there's like a few of these cases, but did I get the arm fracture or not? He got the arm fracture, he won the firefight. These things still exist, but so you have like I think this is why we see a lot of your average player doesn't invest a lot. They're not going to put a lot of their value into these things because, like, yes, they do give them direct buffs. Like 5.56 A1 is worse than M995. In a general sense. I mean, maybe there's some.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could argue it a few different ways, but just on the stats alone, we would say, by and large, it's better. But there's a cost to it that you have to pay. So if you're going to eat that cost in a raid, and then if you die to a random event, like a random roll, it's going to feel really bad. You're going to feel like your value that you put in. It's almost like it's like this weird conundrum where it's like your value is represented by your stash value or your rubles, whatever. Yeah. You invest that because, hey, I got all this money, I'm really good. This will make me even better. And then you lose and it feels really bad. And then on the opposite side, you have people that I would say the majority will play it safe, do like the more efficient thing where it's like they still have a lot of value and you can still like increase that, but you're not like investing a lot in these direct raid, survival enhancements because there's still the ever-present loom of the unknown and the random events of Tarkov that will get you killed.
Yeah. It almost makes me think with that particular example. Mm-hmm. It almost makes me feel that, and I'm not sure, like this is just off the top of my head, so I don't know, but I almost feel that with some of those items that are really super, super, super top tier, and I don't know how far you extend this, but that you may having the ability to remove some of that randomness might be good because that's actually how it works for gun jams, right? So if you pay the price, you can remove the random feature by staying above 93 by just refreshing your base gun. I almost feel for something like, maybe if it's finding raid only, like anything you can buy from the traders, sure, you're going to take the randomness. You're going to get the ricochet dings. You take in the 338 APs that you found 3 of through the whole wipe and you hit somebody in the head with it, you just remove it has no ricochet chance on helmets or something like that. I don't know. I feel that's fair. That's kind of fair. You've paid the premium with scarcity or whatever. Like it's not just outright cost. It's like they literally are not findable really. Like you can't really get access to them. And in that sense, it would feel then fairer for those really top end items. Because right now we're saying, okay, no matter how good you get, no matter how much you spend, and no matter how high a level item that you get, someone still could just ding it off a Ratnik, and it feels it feels rubbish, right? Or like a pair of Condor glasses. Yeah. It feels bad. So it almost feels as if for some of those top end items, you say, right, and this is the part of its special trait that it removes the RNG, and it's like. it's true when you fire it, and then you still got to do all these stuff, still got to hit the headshot and da da da. So something like 338 AP, I feel that makes you feel better.
But here's the thing, right? And this is interesting because this was talked about too in the Marvel Snap GDC, was there's a transfer of joy. Your loss in happiness is directly given to that guy that got the dinged off his helmet. Like, he survived, maybe he kills you later or whatever, but like, your loss of joy is now net gained by him. Like, he's now joyful because of that random interaction, and like, I don't know, it's one way they address that was they have bots. They have like their matchmaking. If they see you losing too much, you'll go up against bots and they'll throw. If you're winning too much,
right,
they'll read your mind and beat you. That's kind of how they balance that out. But nonetheless, it's interesting in Tarkov because there is like a net change. You're losing, they're gaining. So nothing's really been lost. It's just been transferred.
Maybe, but the guy on the receiving end here, we're talking about, the average helmet user or whatever, and there's someone's using class 3, class 4s, da da da, and they're going to ricochet some shots and not ricochet other things. Whereas on the bullet side, it's like some bullets are really bad and some get better and better and better and better, and some are like literal gold dust. And I feel that like the feels bad around the 338 AP outweighs the positive experience from deflecting the shot, because you won't even know which bullet it is actually when you're receiving it, unless it blacks something else out at the same time. And so I feel that there's actually there's an imbalance in like the strength of that emotion, because if you go in with M80 and it bounces off a helmet, you go like, okay, fair enough. As a player, you go like, I've been saving these 5 rounds for the entire
That's
wipe,
what you're saying.
and I hit like the epic headshot over 600 meters. It's like, an insane gaming moment, because it's like super rare thing, and you hit the shot and all this other stuff. Like, they had to be in the right place, and it connects, and then it dings off. You're just like, like it ruins all of that, right? Like, if it's for an M80, I understand, it makes sense, but I actually think that this situation is asymmetric. I do.
If there was no ruble value, like if rubles, you delete a ruble from this game, right, and you just had a bunch of choices, would you still feel the same?
Then it wouldn't matter as much. It's because it's such a rare thing. It's so impactful, and this is kind of how I open this. I don't know where you draw the line there, right? It's like, do you put it on M61? Well, probably not. That's, do you put it on stuff that you can only craft in the workbench? Like, does that have the randomness removed? I don't know where you draw that line, because at some point everybody starts using it, and then no one has the randomness again. Like we had the system with the thing, right? It's like only the Chads have no randomness, and everyone else suffers. It's like, well, that feels bad. So that's why I'm like, okay, yeah, how do you balance that? But I feel that you can definitely set it on the firing range only rounds, and I think that's a 100%, like, for sure for me. No problem. 7N40, a 338 AP, SSA AP for, like, how often do people use the bullet above M995 SSA AP, and the other one for 762 by 39? I don't even have any of those bullets this wipe. I've not seen either of them for 556 or 762. Not got either of them. But if those kind of bullets remove the randomness, fair enough. That would feel okay to me,
All right, so let's do this then. We got to wrap up here quickly, but let's do that, right? The AP, Lapua AP we remove the random, so you get no fragmentation, no ricochet. Like, it's the most consistent round, okay? Now let's do the same thing, but opposite on the bottom end, okay? What if you took like one of the 9x19 Makarov rounds and gave it like 99%? What would you do? The 1% chance to like one tap you, but it's like super cheap and it's like a super freakish thing. Like, does that balance it out? Because then if you have, as you said, if you have like the top end stuff be extremely consistent, like virtually always consistent, then how do you get those David and Goliath moments, those upsets for like the people that don't have that stuff? Like, how do they compete? Because they're stuck with the shitty random guns, essentially, the random stuff.
In some ways, I don't know. I almost feel that the underdog versus the geared player thing these days is actually more fair than ever has been. And a lot of the mechanics around undergeared players versus overgeared players typically actually don't come down to RNG, in my opinion, because a lot of it is leg meta, where the damage is very consistent. Yes, it's RNG on where the buckshot like pellets actually go, but like, if you're close enough and you connect, with a KS-23 with Magnum buckshot and a 153 or 155 or even a revolver shotty, whatever you want, that's actually quite consistent. And then again, not that many people are using face shields, so you have to aim and shoot and hit them in the eyes or hit them in the jaws.
But if the
because
face
there's nothing
shield,
there, if there's a face shield there, I understand.
Well,
that.
I'm saying
that kind of makes sense.
If the wrist T was like consistent, you know, there was like no, like there was no rolls. Like they had to have another consistent round to pin it. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you make? In other words, what I'm saying is like if you take all the top tier stuff and you make it no RNG, it means that they also have to have top tier stuff to compete. I mean, we're kind of using the false framework because as you're saying, you can shoot them in the leg, right? So I guess that would be your answer to that.
Then, kind of, yeah, because I just feel that the David versus Goliath mechanics are just very different mechanics, and we're talking about the very fringe situation where you use something insane. So like even the top players aren't able to use this stuff consistently. So I don't feel like the situation is broken because these rounds are very, very rare and very, very special. And use them for very particular opportunities. But if you do, then I think you should be rewarded for it. Whereas, yeah, the situation the other way around, I don't know if you want people to just like die randomly from the next shot. It's certainly interesting to have like more randomness on the gut, like the 9x18 bullets. So like the flesh damage, like have more some randomness there. So that sometimes they just, you know, sometimes you do low damage and you go whatever, and I was going to die anyway. And sometimes you do high damage and just kill them because it like blows their leg off. Or like I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether it's kind of intriguing to me.
It is intriguing, but it also sounds. It almost sounds like nothing's really changed. Well. Yeah, it's because like in once this is kind of like going back to Dota 2, the pseudo random. It's like the system we have now, we can maybe say it's a little bit more consistently random versus the system we're proposing, where basic, at least that I'm adding on to what you proposed in the sense, is being stretched further out between two extremes. On one extreme, you have at the top tier, the most consistent stuff. It's super expensive, but you know, it's never gonna do any random event versus on the very bottom, like, yeah, it's dirt cheap, but man, take your luck. I don't know if this thing's gonna jam. I don't know if it's gonna shoot a GL out of it. Just try it, you know? Could you imagine like 1 ruble, it's like a Makarov and it randomly fires a random round or, you know, has like could like spawn a Killa out, just like, go and kill stuff for you.
You go mad now.
Yeah, sorry. We got a little too extreme on the spectrum here.
Oh gosh.
Cool.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah. This was fun. I enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun.
Given we have to wrap up pretty quickly, should we just quickly cover the Unrecord for a sec? Because there's not actually that much to say. I had a little dig around. I don't know how much reading you did on the game, but I had a quick dig around. Like, for those of you who haven't seen it, there was a game that appeared across social media, and I saw it on Twitter, and it was this body cam game that's been. I saw some footage of it a while back. Someone saying this is in prototype.
Yeah.
It's in Unreal 5, which is pretty cool. And what it looks like is a first-person shooter of some kind. And it's called Unrecord. And it looks like a VR game. It isn't a VR game, but it looks like a VR game. That's what I thought it was when you first see it. Because it's recorded in that way, like that you get from a VR recording, where you've got that sort of fisheye lens kind of thing. Because it's the only real way to like showcase it properly on like a 2D screen. But it's quite intriguing because people started seeing this thing and being like, "Oh my god, this looks like real, almost like real life footage." It's actually insane because it's the body cam is separate from the gun, and lots of people were saying that it was actually fake even at one point. And the guys actually they like created a video where they were showing, you know, just moving the gun around randomly and like shooting the floor and all sorts of stupid stuff to say like, no, this isn't fake. It is real. We're making this thing. And it seems fascinating, honestly. Like after looking at it a little bit more, I don't know whether it's necessarily the fact that whether the graphics are hyper realistic in and of themselves, or whether it's just like the filming style makes it feel so real because it looks like real footage that we've not had in games before. So when you look at it, you go, this looks like real body cam footage. No other game has body cam footage, so therefore it can't be a video game, and it looks more realistic. I feel like there's definitely an effect like that going on with it. And some of the effects, some of the lighting effects and things. Before we just like jump into it properly, there's one thing that I found really interesting about the trailer was just like all of the effects and stuff. There's like particle effects, there's like, you know, lighting, like lens flare. It's like it's filled with effects, which makes it feel kind of realistic. there's actually quite a lot of like fog and stuff to create atmosphere. It like reminded me a lot of like the original inspiration behind the EFT lighting and why it looks the way it looks, because it feels very realistic. But actually, when you're playing it as a gamer, ultimately it might mean that people can hide in dark corners and certain lighting elements are really dark inside and yada yada yada. Right, you need to change your gamma and stuff. So like I did notice that in the trailer. I thought, I wonder if this is why Tarkov's like design philosophy around the styling of fog and stuff like that indoors and Interchange and things was like that in the first place, because it does feel cool and it looks cinematic. Whether it's actually good to play is another question. But anyway, so the quick blurb, I'll just read this and then you can tell me what you saw about it. So it says, Unrecord is a single-player FPS that tells the story of a tactical police officer from the perspective as his body camera. You work to solve a complex case and you'll need to use your tactical and detective skills to succeed. We've mostly seen just shooting, but there's like dialogue and other stuff. So what did you think on your trips around the net about this thing?
Oh boy, man, I don't know, dude. I got a lot of mixed stuff about it. I mean, I'll just say I don't know. I mean, it's interesting from like a gaming perspective, right? It's interesting to interact with a game in that manner. You know, the body cam first person shooter, I guess you would call it. I don't. It's unique. You know, it's pretty cool. Now it is, you know, I don't want to be that, you know, video games are making people more violent, you know. It's just I am a little like hesitant because it did look, I think, to the untrained eye, like if you just posted that clip, some like the clip that was on Twitter, so you know, wherever, I mean, tons of people were like, as you said, were like, this ain't a game, this is real, you know, is this real? And part of me is just like, I don't know. It's how real are we gonna get? You know what I mean? Like, what will be the like you know, we got VR now. Like, it's just like I don't know. I part of me is like I don't like that things are getting so real. You know what I mean? Like I like the very keeping it very clear in the minds of people that, you know, this is not reality, you know what I mean? But it's like, but you can like do a lot of cool stuff. And like, I may never get to be a soldier, but like, it's kind of cool it is cool to like go through the experience in a virtual setting and then have that story play out as well. Like, you know, whatever story comes with that. So anyways, it's just like, long story short, it's kind of a mixed bag for me. I'm interested to see what it's like, and you know, maybe we'll play it if the reviews are good. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll have to see. The big question that I have just about like gameplay mechanics and like how you actually play it is, how do you control the body cam from the actual aim? Because it's got that weird, like, because they're completely separate, right? And that's why I thought it was VR, because that normally only works if you've got a touch controller in your hand and your head is doing the pointing, and that's normally where you get to see, you know, the gun moving around like this. Like, how do you even aim when it's like, when the gun's like free floating like that? Like, I can't imagine the control scheme that's going to make that work. Like, does it only work with a controller or something? Like, I'm just like confused as to how that even functions.
Yeah, that's the really interesting part for me as well. It's how the playing in that manner. I think that's pretty interesting.
Because like we talked before with Tarkov as well about, and some other games that have got that kind of like box, right? So you can move the gun around in the box, and then at the edge, then it turns your character, kind of thing. So maybe it's the same. So it's like, but then that would feel, I don't know, that would feel really strange. I think if the box was really huge, it's almost like an edge pan RTS, where like, you know, within the box you're just like, but when you go to the edge, then it starts to turn. But it means you're gonna have to have your gun at the edges to turn at all, which I don't think is the way. It didn't look like that when I was looking at the trailer. So
it's hard to say, dude.
I know.
And that's why it was like, oh, is this real? Oh, is this a VR game? You know, like it is very, it's pretty cool, honestly. Like, very cool design there that they came up with.
It's a cool concept. There's really not that much about it. Like I did a bit of reading about it, but there's just not that many people are able to. There's nothing about it right now, really.
Yeah. I think it's just like, I don't even know if it's a studio, if it's just one guy. I can't remember, but they're like in Europe somewhere. I forget the exact country.
They're called Drama. Developer Drama. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who they are. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's intriguing. We will see. The unexpected success of Unrecord's video in 2022 has prompted us to accelerate development so as not to lose our momentum and establish our identity. So there's no release date or even estimated year of release at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows, man? Who knows? We're just going to have to see. The other game that was actually kind of interesting, I didn't expect to talk about this, but I might give it a go because I don't know much about it, was Ghost of Tabor. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's like a VR Tarkov kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I might give that a try because I have a friend who was like, "Yeah, you should try it out. It's insane." He was like, "I've literally just like played for an hour or whatever, and like I'm physically like sweating." So I might have to crack out the old CV1 Oculus and maybe give that a try. I might have a look into that, but I don't know much about it yet, so maybe I'll talk about that another time. Probably not next week because I'm going to be busy, but definitely an interesting one. All these things to look forward to.
Yep. I'm excited for V Rising on the 17th. The update's going to be so epic, dude. I can't wait.
Is that worth playing?
Huh?
Is that worth playing, V Rising? Sounds good.
I'm definitely going to play it. I mean, I enjoy it, but I can't say for certain if you were won't. I can say you need to get Marvel Snap, dude. 5-minute games, dude, on your phone while you're a gamer. You have a phone. No, I think
the fact that it's so quick
does like
appeal.
That's honestly, I mean, it was made for the mobile first, and yeah, I think
because like Hearthstone, like it kind of goes on too long. That was always my issue. It sometimes goes on too long, and I'm very, very particular about that. I've said that many times. Right, it's one of the reasons why I basically like I haven't quit the game, but like I don't play Dota 2 seriously anymore.
I'm in the same
because
boat. It's like
the timing thing. It's like you press go, and then it's 15 minutes before you even get in with the draft and the queuing, whatever. And then the game can take anywhere from 30 minutes up to an hour and a half, and you're just like, I just don't have the ability to do that.
Playing an hour of like a losing game, like it's the worst feeling in the world.
So bad. Talking about an RNG, that's way worse, honestly. Yeah.
All right, well, let's wrap this puppy up so we can get on to our lives. And thank you, audience members, listening always. Quick shout out to the Discord. Check the description of the podcast or this video if you want to join the Discord and chat with us and other members. So yeah, see you all next week. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.
Catch you later.